Hi, welcome to Dialed In. I'm Don Knabe, Los Angeles County Supervisor for the 4th District. For this episode, we have an incredible treat for all of you. My guests today are three of California's former governors, Governors George Deukmejian, Governors Pete Wilson, and Governor Gray Davis. Between them, they served from 1983 to 2003. For this episode, we're going to talk about their time as governor and what they think about is going on today in California. I'm looking forward to their insights, and hopefully we'll have some fun along the way. I hope you will enjoy the show. Well, let's jump right into it. I'm pleased to welcome all of you, and I really appreciate the fact you've taken time to be here. First of all, we have George Deukmejian, 35th Governor of the great state of California, former Attorney General, former California State Senator, and member of the State Assembly. We have the 36th Governor of the great state of California, Governor Pete Wilson, former United States Senator, 29th Mayor of the City of San Diego, and former member of the California State Assembly. And we have the 37th Governor of California, the Honorable Gray Davis, former Lieutenant Governor of California, former California State Controller, former California State Assembly member, and Chief of Staff to Governor Jerry Brown in his first term. Again, thank you all for joining me today. Well, let's start with it, just sort of set the stage and just sort of go back and reflect. That's what we're going to try to do in this first segment, and sort of give us an idea, what were the issues facing California at the time that you took office? You know, all the glory of the campaign and the hard work and the swearing in and the galas and the parties, and you wake up the next day and, by golly, I'm the governor of the great state of California. Governor Deukmejian.
Well, I think in each case there's a different setting that has to be recognized, and by that I mean in my case, when I was elected, and I started in 1983, I was the only Republican who was elected in that statewide campaign, and I had a legislature that was controlled by the Democratic Party. But I had been a member of the legislature in the Senate for many years, and I thought that my former colleagues were going to pay great deference to me, you know, and really assist me. Instead, I found a lot of strong opposition to things we proposed, and it was very difficult getting started in the first year. But as far as the issues, we had a very poor business climate issue to deal with. We had a lot of businesses that were looking to leave the state, and that was a big issue. The budget is always a big issue, and also back in 1983, crime was a big issue in California.
Governor Wilson.
Well, there were very much the issues that persist to this day, but to take off from where George left off, crime was a problem. We had a dangerously lenient criminal justice system. Rapists were being released from prison after serving very little time. We had, notwithstanding his efforts to improve the jobs climate, which encountered difficulty with the Democratic majorities that he inherited, we had a real challenge because not only was there an international recession, which came late to California but went deeper and longer here, at the same time we had base closures, we had defense contracting cuts, we had kind of a perfect storm. So one of the challenges was most definitely the budget. After I had been elected, I learned that the budget that I was to submit about 4 days after being sworn in would have to close a revenue gap that was about 1/3 of this entire state general fund. And at that point, we thought it was perhaps only 1/6, and we did it all with spending cuts, which was greeted by the Democratic majorities in both houses with hoots, hollers, and declarations that it was dead on arrival. So crime was an issue, the budget was an issue, and frankly, as far as I was concerned, education was an issue that was long overdue for the kind of attention that would restore credibility and real competence and accountability more than anything else to a public school system that not too long before that had been the best in the nation, but had seriously slipped.
Governor Davis, did Governor Wilson leave you a surplus?
He did leave me a small surplus when we When I first took office, we weren't sure. The finance department thought we might be looking at a deficit. I think there was about a $3 billion surplus at the end of my first operating surplus at the end of my first year. By the way, we're on a commission together, and one thing we always agree on, Don, if there was a dispute, it was never the governor's fault. It was always the legislature or someone else. So that's what brings us together.
No, I understand. That's all about leadership, right?
That's right.
Okay.
But coming to the issues of the day, each built upon the other, and I was very concerned about education. That was really my passion. That's what got me in politics. If I've had any success, it's really because of a good education. So we were able to get the first academic performance index put in place, really measuring the progress of every school, and we would reward schools, Don, that got better, significantly better than they were the year before, put in the high school exit exam, and also tried to deal with the issues of student debt and the cost of college by creating something called a merit scholarship. So every student who scored in the top 10% of their high school class on standardized tests would get $1,000, and they could get it 3 times at 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. That was enormously popular, and unfortunately gave way to the recession that came a couple years later. But just as Governor Wilson built on crime and some of the business development issues that he inherited from Governor Deukmejian, we built on some of the progress he made on education.
Very good. The cost of education, we'll talk about that later, but sort of rolling back. Priorities during your years as governor, I mean, were their own personal priorities? Were they established by the campaigns that you all went through? Were they, established by media? What were the pressures and sort of the priorities, again, as you wake up that first morning and then you've got the next 4 years and the 4 years after that? How did you establish your priorities? Let's start with Governor Davis.
Well, you campaign on certain reforms, and I mentioned some of my high priorities in education, and so I called a special session, and we got all these changes in. We got some other important changes. To get accepted at the University of California, for example, you have to take advanced placement courses. But there were several high schools in the county of Los Angeles that didn't offer them. Many in the Central Valley didn't. So we required that all high schools offer advanced placement courses. And then we said if you're in the top 4% of your class, you automatically get admitted to one campus of the University of California. So all that got done in the first 90 days. But then life intrudes. We had the internet,
right.
We had the dot-com boom and then the dot-com bust.
Governor Deukmejian?
Well, I was determined. I had been in state offices for 20 years before I became governor. And I was determined that we were going to do what we said we were going to do during the campaign. And I repeated that ad nauseum to our staff, that whatever we did and on all the times we met and discussed issues, I said, look, we're going to do what we said we were going to do, and then we tried desperately to do that. And so it was important what we had told the public during the campaign, and we wanted to carry that out and try to implement that. And so we stuck to that, and by the time we got done, after 8 years, we could safely say that we had done what we said we were going to do.
Well, that's what it's all about, too. I mean, there's a lot of talk today, fast forwarding to today, about gridlock in Sacramento and the political atmosphere both here as well as in Congress. Were there any significant differences of gridlock? It seems a lot worse today than any of your administrations in trying to work together. Governor Wilson, what I mean is it relates to today versus back when you were governor and gridlock.
Well, you've got an interesting situation, Don, in the fact that George and I had to deal with Democratic majorities. I'm not sure that wasn't easier in a way than what Gray had to deal with when members of his own party were the heavy majority in both houses. After 16 years of Deukmejian and Wilson, they were eager to spend. In fact, we had a conversation after Gray was elected, and he said, I'd really like your counsel. And I said, don't let this legislature spend money you don't have. And they will try. They will pressure you unmercifully. And don't let them do it, because that is more pernicious even than tax increases. So I think that what we were able to do required that we make clear that there were some lines in the sand.
Well, you had some control too, to a
Absolutely.
Republican governor, and yet it was difficult for Gray.
And the office of
Governor
governor
Davis.
has real power.
Right.
You can do certain, there are limits on it, but you certainly can stop bad legislation by the veto.
Legislation, as you look back, what was probably the single most important piece of legislation that you signed that you felt, that you felt personally truly made a difference? I know it's hard, how many bills you get across your desk, thousands, but was there one piece of legislation that stood out for each of you? Governor Deukmejian?
Well, I'm getting so old, Don, I can't remember that far back. I honestly can't pick out one or two. What we did was usually everything focused on the budget, and you set priorities in the budget and so forth. And I was very fortunate, even though the legislature was controlled by the Democrats, the leadership of the legislature were very practical people. And so at the very beginning, I had great difficulty in getting anything moving. And
even after being there for 20 years before that?
Absolutely. And so we agreed to meet with the leadership of the legislature, and they came down, and it wasn't just the speaker and the president pro tem, it was a lot of their committee chairs and so forth. And we'd sit around this table, and some of those committee chairs used the opportunity to do nothing but criticize me, and we were getting nowhere. Finally, I said to my staff, that's it. I'm not going to meet with all of these people. I said, I'll meet with the speaker and with the president pro tem of the Senate, and we'll iron out these. And that was sort of the beginning of what they now call the Big Five. And it included the Republican leadership in both houses. So when that happened, things began to change. And Willie Brown was the Speaker of the Assembly. And Willie used to go out in public and he'd say, you know, that Governor Deukmejian, he's that part of the horse that goes over the fence last. And he'd have all these nice, kind things to say about me in public. But when we sat down, he was really very practical, and we would work out solutions to problems. David Roberti, Senator Roberti, was the leader of the Senate at the time. And again, we worked these things out, and although the members didn't probably like it, but that's the way we got some things accomplished.
Boy, times have changed. It's difficult to work anything out with anyone up there. There's no real sense of history. Governor Wilson, was there a piece of legislation that sticks out to you? Or
there were a couple. One was the Three Strikes Bill, which we estimate probably in the first decade that it was on the books, prevented 2 million Californians from becoming crime victims because the people who would have victimized them were locked up. Another was a bill that was carried for me by the young woman, Democrat, liberal Democrat from Marin County. She was the chair of the Assembly Education Committee, and it was a bill to restore standardized statewide testing. Gray mentioned an exit exam based on standardized testing. There was no standardized testing.
Right.
And it was perhaps the bloodiest fight that we had. We won it by one vote. It was bitterly opposed by the teachers' union, not by teachers. Many teachers said, this is necessary. We need to understand whether or not the kids have learned what they need to have learned to go into the next grade. Employers need to know. Parents need to know. They didn't. And so with one vote margin in the Assembly on the last night of the '97 session, we restored standardized statewide testing. And parents had the opportunity to read in the newspapers how their children's school was doing. And in many cases, they were not happy. They were resentful. They should have been.
Governor Davis?
I would mention two. One bill by then Assemblywoman Fran Pavley was the first bill to ban greenhouse gases in the country. It focused on transportation, sources of emissions, and it's about 32% of the emissions that Governor Schwarzenegger was counting on in AB 32. Because we had to accept that reality, and I'm pleased that we were first. But maybe more important is a bill I signed after several weeks of meeting with the legislature, medical personnel, UC personnel, about problems with what we then called, Don, HMOs. We now call them health plans. Right. So if your health plan told you, Don, you can't have that operation, you had no recourse. There was nothing you could do. You couldn't sue the health plan under law. I created a system with the legislature where you can appeal that now to a group of doctors in the UC system, and their judgment is binding, final, and precedential, meaning it sets a precedent for someone else. About 35% of the time, the patient would win. Moreover, we created a department whose primary goal was to be an advocate for the patient, and they would jawbone the health plans frequently into providing care they didn't want to care. So those two actions, I think, have helped several 100,000 Californians get the procedure they thought they were entitled to.
Well, it's amazing. I think when you guys reflect back, all of you as past governors, and reflect back in those legislative processes, the impact on the lives of people. I mean, the bills that you had to sign, the thousands coming across your desk. And, well, we have a new governor today, sort of a new old governor. You know, not old in age, but been there, done that, in Governor Jerry Brown. And actually, we have a clip of one of you giving some thoughts on Governor Brown. Would you take a look?
Well, Governor Deukmejian, you followed Jerry Brown in office, and you have the unenviable position of following him now.
I was a state senator when Jerry Brown was governor. I never understood him then. I don't understand him now.
All right. Sort of, you know, that's deja vu, huh? I mean, then and now. So here we have former chief of staff here with us and former governor in his second go-around. The relationship between the different levels of government. Governor Wilson, you were a mayor. I was a mayor, county supervisor. Let's start with you. How do you think that relationship was at the time that you were governor between cities and counties and local government in general, school districts? Such an important relationship. How was it during your tenure, you think?
Well, it was interesting because on one hand, I was sensitive to the fiscal needs of local government and thought it wrong for state government to impose duties on them without providing funds. And there were basic responsibilities of local government that were more important than some of the things the legislature wanted to put on them. But the other thing was that we also found that in a number of communities, people who wanted to create jobs were being essentially dissuaded by the resistance of local governments. I mean, sort of a no-growth attitude. And frankly, I raised hell about it. When people came and said, you know, we would really like to bring jobs, and we could bring clean industry, good jobs, but we're getting resistance in the communities. I had little patience with that, and we created, as a result of the Commission on California's Competitiveness, a Trade and Commerce Agency. One of the few times I've supported the creation of a new agency, but it was to assist those who wished to bring jobs to overcome the permitting hurdles and all the other burdens that were preventing them from doing so. We succeeded, and the budget reflected it by the increase in revenues.
Well, it helped local government. I remember Governor Deukmejian, you and I, and the LADC and Panasonic, and an opportunity in the city of Torrance. And because of that agency, it was very helpful in bringing jobs down there locally. Governor Deukmejian, during your tenure, your relationship, I mean.
Yeah, as I remember it, and again, forgive me because I'm so old I can't remember everything. But as I remember it, the relationships with most levels of government, local government, were pretty good, except for Los Angeles County. Now, Los Angeles County really irritated me because Los Angeles County was paying all of their top people more money, more salaries than we were paying to the top leadership in state government. And yet Los Angeles County would always come in every year and they would ask for more money and more funds. So finally, there was a new chief administrative officer. I think it was Jim Hankla. Had been selected, and he came to me, and I knew him from Long Beach, and we talked a little bit, and I said, Jim, what is your job? And he explained what it was, and I said, no, I said, you got it all wrong. I said, Jim, your job is to prevent all of those supervisors from coming to me and asking me for more things. I said, now that's your job, to protect me from all of these supervisors. Anyway, that was just said jokingly, but there was a little bit of truth to it, and
just a little bit.
A little bit of truth, you know. But I think in general, things between the levels of government at that time were pretty good. Now I can't speak for what it is today. I don't really know exactly, but I do know one issue that has come up that has some prominence, and that's in this what they call prisoner realignment program.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
There, the state is releasing a lot of prisoners a little bit early to meet with some mandates by courts, and that's creating some problems for local government and for the public as a whole. But we didn't have that kind of a problem when I was governor.
Well, I know the first thing after Jim Hankla met with you, the first thing he did was to cut off coffee to the 8th floor at all Board of Supervisors' offices. So, you know, in this austerity budget, to respond to you, he just said no coffee on the 8th floor. Governor Davis.
Well, like Governor Deukmejian, I live in LA County, so I was concerned about it doing better in certain areas where we could help. And remember the O.J. Simpson trial? I mean, I think most people felt that was a failure of forensics and a reflection of a bad crime lab that served the city and county of L.A. So one thing I'm proud of is working with the supervisors, the sheriff, former Speaker Hertzberg, to create a world-class crime lab that serves the county, the city, and 88 independent cities. It's the third or fourth best crime lab in the country. And it's right here at Cal State LA. And what's really neat is they've made the first 3 floors is a university. So if you want to be a criminologist, that's where you study. And the top 3 floors, people are solving crimes. And we go out there occasionally, and the criminologists in the top 3 floors said, you know, occasionally these kids have a good idea and help us solve crimes. So that's a gift that keeps on giving. And that was sort of brought on by the, you know, CNI view of the world where you can solve a crime in an hour, and it has greatly increased the number of convictions that have been obtained in the county of LA.
It's also helped job life.
Yeah, we did the same thing to expand the facility up in Northern California and Oakland.
But also helped keep some TV productions here in Southern California. A lot of CSI shows they use the lab and production facilities down here in Los Angeles, in California. So that's good for the entire state as well, too. Well, jobs. Job means health care. Probably one of the big issues facing all of us in the job situation as well as local governments is the Affordable Care Act. And, you know, like I tell everybody, whether you're for it or against it, from our perspective, we have to be prepared. We have the largest uninsured population in America in Los Angeles County, about 2.5 million people. At the end of the day, when these people start having a choice coming up, we're still going to have 1 million people without insurance. Are any of your clients talking about Affordable Care Act and the impact on their businesses and jobs here in California?
Yes, they are. And they're not happy with it. And I think you're going to see that a number of them, and it's particularly cruel to the small businessman or woman. Someone that owns a small business is going to suffer. And many of them are simply not going to be able to provide what is required. And the purpose of this, which has been made clear at the federal level by the proponents, is to ultimately have a single-payer system like the United Kingdom, like Canada. And many of the people who are proponents make no bones about it. That's, in my judgment, a terrible mistake. It will mean that the care is not as good. To say that you will have the opportunity to stay with your own physician is simply not the case. And it is also true that doctors are very unhappy with it. And I've talked to several who say it will load us with paperwork and make it more difficult to give the treatment to patients that we want to give. And we're already suffering a terrible shortage in having sufficient doctors in this country and in this state. And it's going to get worse. So
the small business piece is the impacts, I think, are going to force small business owners to reduce the hours of their employees to keep them under the limit. So instead of having a single job, they're going to have to go out and get another job to replace the job, because they're going to have two jobs because of the way they, the thresholds that do.
That's exactly right.
Governor Davis.
Well, I'm going to bring some balance to this discussion here, Don. This is a change on the order of Social Security and Medicare, both of which were fought by the Republican Party, both of which are warmly embraced by the Republican Party now. I don't know if it will turn out as well, but there are some very good things about it. First of all, if you have a pre-existing condition or a child that has a pre-existing condition, you cannot be denied care. Secondly, if your son or daughter lives at home, they're entitled to enjoy the benefits of your insurance policy to get to be 26. And there are some costs that all of us pay today that presumably will at least be reduced. I mean, it's not like care isn't being provided at emergency rooms. You and I pay for that. When we go to a hospital, we pay far more than the cost of the procedure to account for all this uncompensated care. So the theory is that those costs, emergency room costs and uncompensated care costs, which all of us pay in terms of higher premiums, will go down. Now, will it work out? That's the great unknown. But I think it is a risk worth taking, and I'm glad that President Obama put it on the books. Will there be some challenges? Yes. But there's a possibility that greatly increased premiums, which have been driven by the health plans, 8, 9, 10% a year, have come down the last couple of years to 4 or 5%, and it may be the leveling effect of Obamacare that is causing that to happen. Time will only tell.
We hope so. I mean, the exchange rates that they're flashing around here in California are very, very expensive and way beyond what some of the premiums you're paying right now. From a government perspective, though, the good piece of that is that we can no longer just say that we're there to serve the poor. We have to be a competitor. We have to maintain some of those to become eligible for insurance. So from our perspective, I think it's good. It's a cultural change that we have to be a competitor, not just a provider. Worst case scenario, though, is there's still going to be 1 million people uninsured here in California and Los Angeles County in particular. And that's the impact on local government. But we hope that there will be some balance and some competitive nature out there in the system. But right now the system looks pretty expensive. So we'll have to see. That's what my concern is, though, because everybody thinks it's way off. It's January 1st, 2014.
Like a freight train.
And that's that with immigration reform and everything else that's going on. So it could be a very significant impact on this state.
You said freight train, Gray, and I will just quote several Democratic senators who voted for it who have described it as a train wreck.
Well, look, all these things, and these governors know better than I, all of the major changes get tweaked, amended, adjusted as time goes on. So I doubt that they've got it perfect right now, and hopefully the adjusted changes will be made.
All right,
well, we're trusting young men like you.
Young men, I appreciate the compliment.
As leaders in government to resolve all the problems.
Well, what I appreciate is all of you being here today, and we're going to have another segment of this show, but right now we just want to thank all of you. Thank you guys for joining us today, and Governor Gray Davis, Governor Pete Wilson, and Governor George Deukmejian, and we'll be back with segment 2. Thank you again for tuning in to Dialed In. I hope you enjoyed hearing from our former governors. I really appreciate the fact that they took the time to join us here today. Thank you to the City of Los Angeles for allowing us to use their facilities, and as always, to Charter Communications for allowing this show to happen, as well as working with us to produce the show. Next month, we'll be back with the governors to talk about what's in store for California over the next few decades. See you next month.